Hello, good morning, guys.
Good morning, everyone.
The session today, right, is focused on SaaS companies plus the compliance that we face, right, today, tomorrow around it, right? Now, there are a lot of things in compliance, right? There are two types of companies that I kind of call out, right? Companies who actually want to comply, do it right, make sure that the user database is right, and the companies who want it cosmetically done, right? If you want it cosmetically done, just get a privacy policy, guys, right? This session is not for you, right? Okay, perfect. So if you
And a
want to
cookie banner.
comply, yeah, and a cookie banner, exactly. And wait for none of your business to come to you, right? Max Shrimps. Okay. If you want to do something about it and it's not something, that you need to come out with 1 CR, 2 CR, right? It's not that costly, right? It's about the culture, right? If you have the right culture, right? You have good with stuff. You can get things done, right? So end of day privacy is about culture, right? So yeah, so that is a session for you, right? That's why we built this. We kind of came out. We also have a compliance checklist before the end of the session, right? For you to go back, right? It's just do these 10 things, 5 things, right? To make sure that Monday, when you'll go back to work, you can just do those 10 things to make your privacy compliance program or an infosec compliance program better, right? By compliance, I kind of come out and say data protection, because privacy is not just privacy, right? It's data protection end of day, right? You need to make sure that the user data that you have, some instances that you're running, cloud configurations that you have, what data do you have, right?
Yeah.
End of day, yeah, end of day, you know all of these things. So, and that's why we are here. So yeah, let's get into it, guys. Yeah. There are two speakers here. My name is Akarsh Singh. I am CEO, co-founder of Tsaaro Academy. I'm also one of the youngest fellows in information privacy in the world, one of the Indians to be in IEPP advisory board. I'm also a privacy consultant since I have started my career, right? And that's who I am. Why over to Vaibhav, right? So Vaibhav is co-founder, CEO of Privado. Privado is a data mapping app scanning tool, right? Kind of does a lot of things around data mapping and then data cataloging. Or if you do a scan, you can understand how to do a ROPA, all the things that you entail around compliance of privacy. I hope, Vaibhav, I'm to the point now.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, I'll also introduce myself. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining in on. I'm Vaibhav. I'm founder and CEO of Privado. My background is majorly being in product. So building product on B2C and B2B side. And then shifted and started building privacy tech company out of India in 2020. And I've been working with Akarsh since our early days, when we were building our first product and then, learning through the rope and building the right product, etc. I myself a CIPM certified privacy professional, so know a little bit of both the operational side and actually how it will get implemented. And yeah, excited to chat with you today and discuss more.
Yeah, Vaibhav kind of pointed it out, right? I was coming to that. We both kind of started our journeys as entrepreneurs in privacy at a very similar time as well, right? It has been like 1.5, 2 years down the line since we have been trying getting into things, getting the product running, for me, getting the consulting running. But here we are, right? Still there. And it's running now. So, okay. So coming to the companies, right? About Tsaaro, what we do is we're a compliance company. We help companies to get compliant towards things like GDPR, the Indian upcoming law, the UAE law, or any privacy law that you would have heard about. Right, that's our day-to-day job, right? So end of day, we do work around data protection, get data protection practices up and running for companies, right? Like ISO 27001, 27701, right? Around infosec and privacy. Over to you, Vaibhav, for Privado.
Sure. So since the audience is majorly SaaS companies, the amazing products that SaaS companies are building, we help them become compliant with privacy laws much faster relative to how you'll do it without us. So that's number one. And then second is we help you also put that compliance journey on autopilot so that you can sort of close the stuck deals because you don't have that sort of GDPR posture, and B, it's also easier for you to do the next time, the next year, so it becomes like a part of your culture, as Akash was saying. We do that primarily by the heart of it. We have a code scanning technology. So we'll scan the code of all your products and applications and give Akash the entire data that he needs to figure out what needs to be done from a privacy perspective. So that's about Privado.
I think one thing that, in terms of use case, I keep talking to Vaibhav as well, right? See, when we are doing privacy compliance program, the question always is, what data do I have,
Yeah.
right? What data do I have? How do I know that, right? Especially for a product company, right? If you are a SaaS based company, you are running on your own codes, right? Where Privado tool comes in, sits with you, scans that code, and finds out what all data do your code will ingest, right?
Yeah,
So, and that's where the beautiful ROPA gets automated, right?
true.
So, some of the, I would rather say, bigger chunk of the program to understand कि data hai kahan, right? That gets solved, right? Which is a
True.
big problem, right?
Yeah, and Akarsh, I just like to explain it in this way. So if you are, let's say, doing, let's say, data mapping, which we'll talk about, it's, let's say, if it's a 12-month journey, privacy professionals will spend like 9 to 10 months collecting data. Hey, what data do we collect? Asking engineers, sending them questionnaires, and they can actually start their work for the last 2 3 months where they say, okay, is this data even lawful? And if we have to collect this data, what do I need to do? So you are spending most of the time at the things where you are adding least value. So that's where we come in. So we will automate that entire 9 months process into one day. In a couple of minutes, you'll have all that information. And then, privacy teams can actually look at it and say, okay, this data seems, unlawful, or oh, we can collect this data, but we need to have consent and things like those. So you can apply your privacy superpowers once you have the data picture.
Yeah, I think that's how it is happening around in the industry as well. Even the clients that we are working together, we are solving the same problem around the industry, right? The important disclaimer, guys, right? So agenda of the discussion is the data protection regulations. What type of regulations are there? And since as an Indian company, we are also catering to so many people around the world, right? The Indian startup side catering around the world. So what laws are there? What maybe we need to comply, or if we need to go to some market, let's say we want to start doing business in Europe, right? Then what do we need? If you want to do business in Middle East, what do we need, right? Everybody has a privacy law around. So why compliance is a must? What is a compliance checklist, best practices, factors to consider while implementing requirements, and then we'll talk about what will happen, what may happen if we don't do that, right? Okay. So a quick roundup, right? See, Indian startup SaaS companies are in US. US has diverse laws now, CCPA, Virginia, right? You take the name of the state, they may have a
Florida.
law. Yeah, they may have a law, or they may be coming onto the law, right? Singapore has PDPA, India has the upcoming law, right? Then we have UAE data protection law, we have Saudi law, right? Now we have 1 year to comply with the law, right? So
Yeah.
privacy is a journey, right? We are everywhere around the world, we are starting around it. So, okay. So I have a quick question for everyone. The question is, since consumers and people in general are getting more aware about data protection and privacy, so do you think they would trust a non-compliant business? Do you think that if you are a customer, let's say you are a customer and you are going to some company to buy something, would you like more assurance as a person, as a human being? Would you like more assurance towards privacy and data protection, or do you think it doesn't matter to you? It may not matter to a lot of people. It's a journey that we all are taking, right? Everybody is not looking for privacy, but still data protection. But still, my question is, do you think today, as a business, what do you think? Is it a maybe? Okay, so we have 20 people who have answered this. Guys, can you quickly do Menti? I have also dropped the link in the chat.
Someone clearly answered yes. So maybe not the right audience for this.
Yeah. I won't deny the fact that 3 years before I was a yes. I did not care about it. But the beautiful thing about working in privacy is the more you know what can happen with the data, the more scared you are. Even as a privacy professional, when I look around and I'm like, oh, that data is going from my mobile. Okay, my location is going from what can happen, right?
Yeah.
And that starts hitting you back.
Yeah, and the interesting thing about that is it's like no one is actually safe from that. So there are a couple of very interesting article. I think Washington Post had written about how you could essentially track the US president from the location data which was shared. And it's actually an interesting article for privacy professionals to read and figure out, how sharing location data with third parties actually can help you track people.
I think there was another article, the Roman Abramovich, right, when Russia war, right, where are
Yeah,
his planes going, right? So
yeah.
people had exact location of the planes all the time, right? So yeah, privacy is interesting field. So okay, so I think since it's a yes, right? So compliance is a must, right? So Vaibhav, right? My question to you is, why is compliance a must? Why are we talking about this, right? Why should we spend time and money here? Yeah, that's the question.
Sure. So let me answer the question more from a SaaS company perspective. And if there are SaaS founders or even privacy professionals here working in SaaS companies, I think one thing that you might be getting more and more of is, yeah, are you SOC 2 compliant? That's like one that has become like one key point in checklist. Similarly, as you start speaking to your customers, they have now basic expectation that you would be doing stuff on the privacy side as well, and that has become like table stake. Like that's like basic. Do you know what data do you collect? Because if you don't know, then you can't protect it. So while you're having a conversation between with your customers and different people inside that business, you might be selling to, let's say, even a sales company, let's say a sales department. But when you go to privacy and when you start interacting with them, they are interested in figuring out, hey, can I trust this SaaS company out of India and to protect my end users' data, because it's a huge liability for me if they can't, and they judge you on that. So the more you are investing on not just compliance but building that privacy in from early on, it's a win-win for you, because A, you come out as a strong company, B, you can easily establish that trust with your end customers, and you win deals, right? At the end of the day, you will actually see your sales funnel, becoming, shorter as you start having these trust pages up on your website. So I would say, like, if you have to make a business case, the easiest one is what SOC 2 people are making today. That if I get a SOC 2, I will close this deal. I think it's similar for privacy. It's just we don't have a certification today. That's the only difference in my eyes.
I think talking about ROI, right? I think I've worked with a lot of companies around in India, and I've been working since I was in KPMG, right? One of the things that is there is, as a vendor, as a SaaS vendor, when I'm going to do business with a corporate, obviously all the startups, we want to work with corporates, right? That's how the money flows. So
Yeah.
when I go to a corporate and I do business, they ask me a few things, right? Do you have an ISO certificate? How privacy compliant are you? The moment you as a privacy startup, as a SaaS startup, go in, if you're gonna take some personal data from them, right? Then you are a high risk vendor. And the moment you're a high risk or a medium risk vendor assessments are being initiated, right? And it's better to have these certificates, have the software implemented, have your ROPAs done, right? So that even the other company can comply with their laws, right? Because ROPA is under GDPR, ROPA is your responsibility as a vendor as well as the controllers, right? So it's both
Yeah.
of them are the responsibilities there.
Especially if you're doing, like, just to double down on that, especially if you are doing business in Europe and even like larger US companies, I've seen this trend lately that they would come to your website and check your privacy policy. They will see if you have a trust and safety page. And if you have, you will have easier conversations. And second, we have to also realize, if you are like an Indian company, it's by design, you will be scrutinized more, because in Europe, in GDPR, data flowing out of Europe, even to US, needs to be scrutinized, and same it's for India. So if data is flowing out of Europe, they need to do much more diligence on you as a SaaS company. So that's another reason. If you build this, do some basic things from the start and focus on this part, you will actually have easier conversations with your customers and convert them much faster.
And yeah, it's better to have the design right.
Yeah,
So
true.
because if the design is not right from day one, right, it may not access control thing as simple as access controls may not sound very important to you right now. You may think that, hey, I will build this like 1 year down the line and half years down the line. The moment you go to a corporate to sell your product, the first question they ask is this, right? What
Yeah.
about access? Can you integrate my access? So again, I'm just saying. So these are the things that become more important to do business. This is rather a cost of doing business when you are
Yeah, it is table stake. It is table stake for companies now.
okay. I think we talked a lot about compliance. Why is it important? Now, my next question, guys, right? You privacy and data protection compliance. Do you think they require everyone to contribute, or do you think one guy, right? If you called it, hey, this is my guy of privacy, right? Or this is my infosec guy. Is that how it will work, or do you think it will work by an all-round functioning of business? Everybody contributes, and then we get ahead. By the way, Vaibhav, what's your answer?
Oh yeah, so privacy is an interesting field, because while you have central offices, so let's say one person managing it, that office or that person is affected by everyone in the business. So let's say if the product team is building, it's a SaaS company and has customer data, is now doing some machine learning to improve their features. that's an impact someone else has done, but privacy has to fix that, right? They have to look at it. So it's an all encompassing role, while the responsibilities will lie with someone centrally, but it's impacted by everyone in the company. A wrong sales email sent would have some consequences. A marketing website, a website with no privacy notice will have consequences. And these are things that privacy teams don't control, but they have to make sure they're on top of it. They have to have visibility on top of it. So my answer would be true as well. And having
I
said
think
that, let
I'm
me actually go there and answer it as well.
so I think this is something that is a takeaway for all of you, right? Since you are here, I think this is something that kind of comes as a takeaway for this session, especially if you want to take a screenshot. Otherwise, if you will get you the document, full document as well, you can download this. But if you want to take a screenshot, there's a good document to take screenshot of. So compliance checklist, right? So we were talking about this. We're like, what do you need to do?
Yeah.
What are these 10 things? If I do, I'll be better than who I was from yesterday. So Vaibhav, what are these 10 things?
Sure. So let's get into it. So the first one actually, and that's the base of any privacy program you're building, is doing this exercise called data mapping. And let's take an example of only the SaaS side of the thing. So the products and applications you are building and offering to your customers, right? So if you look at a typical SaaS company, you'll have a SaaS dashboard. So like like a dashboard where your customers will log in and perform some activities, and then basically there will be a lot of APIs and microservices powering that. If you are a larger company, you might be also taking that data and doing some analytics on it. So plumbing it, sending it to Snowflake or sending it to Salesforce for your sales team, etc. So you'll be collecting a lot of data via that dashboard and then processing it and sharing it with some third parties. So data mapping is the first place where privacy teams get visibility on this use of data, which is what are we collecting, who we are sharing it with, where are we storing that. And unless you know that, you can't actually be compliant. Because if you don't know what data you're collecting or who you're sharing it with, you can't protect it. You can't even say is it lawful or not. So that's the number one most important starting point. Typically, privacy teams will spend most of the time here, and this is a very challenging part of it if you're doing it manually, or even if you're doing it with a tool which is workflow related, where you are sending questionnaires and getting that information, because you will not get responses back. You will keep chasing people, and at the end of it, what you'll get is you'll get some information back. It will be, in most of the cases, inaccurate, because by the time you would finish the exercise, people would have made more changes. And second is, it will be very, very aggregated for you to actually solve for it. So cutting down, data mapping is the fundamental, is the baseline where you can go to a customer and say, hey, this is the personal data I process overall, and these are my third parties which get access to this data, and this is where I'm storing it. Is it in India? Is it in US? Is it in Ireland, etc.? And this is how I'm going to protect it, right? So that's the first part. Once you have this part in, then depending on certain cases, your size, what data you're processing, you might need to appoint a data protection officer as well, and that person acts like a someone who's checking things and making sure your company is kosher, right? So that's the second point. Then third is limit data collection, and this is where you have to wear your privacy hat, or someone like Akarsh actually works, can come in and actually look at the data that you're collecting and sharing and actually limit it. Can also advise on certain sub-processor, certain third parties, if you're sharing data with, should they be getting the data or not, because these are all design decisions that can impact your sales later on. Fourth point is identifying legal basis. I'll take a simple example, and this becomes more relevant in consumer companies. But for SaaS companies, what you'll say is, hey, pretty much the data I'm processing on behalf of my customer, so it's a contractual obligation. But here is an example where you're not. So let's assume you are a sales CRM company and you are collecting a lot of customer data, and then you have actionable data on usage, etc. And then what you're doing is you're actually running analytics on top of it to improve your product, so that if a new customer comes in, their journey is easier. Now, this is not on behalf of your customer. You need to identify a legal basis. Here, you will be acting like a controller. And this is where people like Akarsh can actually help you, or if you are a privacy professional, can help the product team building in controls, maybe even anonymizing things like those. Fifth point is actually very, very simple. It's making sure your privacy policy is saying what you're doing. So if you have done the data mapping right, your privacy policies should have the data element, your list of your sub-processors, if you're using cookies or not correctly. And just to tell you, people read your privacy policy. Privacy people read your privacy policy, if no one else. Consent management platform. If you are dropping cookies, you'll need a cookie consent manager. If you're using, let's say, HubSpot to send emails, you need to have consent there as well. Privacy by design, again, this becomes like an interesting challenge, because it's, if you have to draw parallel to your other world, if you know of SOC 2, etc., it's basically the parallel of having a continuous compliance of privacy, of GDPR, of CCPA. So privacy by design enables you to do that, which simply means before a new product is launched, if before a new code change happens, do you, or let's say if today is Saturday, right? So typically you might have a release today or on Monday. Your product team might be doing the release. Do you even know what privacy issue in that release is? What has changed? Has data sharing increased or not? That's privacy by design, staying on top of things. I think point 8 is clear. 9 is something that you will start to face as you go enterprises. As you start selling to enterprises in Europe and US, they would really, really want you to keep their data in Europe and not move it to any other jurisdiction. So if you are early and if you can actually have multiple data storing locations, like if you sign up today on Freshworks, they allow you to choose the data storing location, Europe, US, Ireland, etc. So if you can implement that, that's going to help you a lot later. And then finally, it's point 10. Again, this is something where Akarsh and his framework could become very handy. Once you have the visibility, you have to implement it company wide and make sure data is protected through and through. So that's a quick rundown on the compliance checklist.
I kind of wanted to add on to this, right? So I know this is a 10-step compliance checklist. There, it may seem like a lot of steps, but this is the easiest way, rather, right, to kind of comply or quickly do things, right? Turnaround time is less, right? Because without this, without a checklist, without a framework, what we are doing is we're just plugging some, we are just plugging something. Yeah, I think we need a DPO. We're just plugging something, right? And we don't know, right? Maybe we identified legal, we're doing something or the other, but this is something, these are 10 things, right? As a startup, as a SaaS startup, you cannot miss on them because your users are there and you need to give them more rights. And obviously, if you look at even the Indian Putra Swami judgment, right, that came, so right to data deletion, right, is still a right in India, right? So and cookie and compliance, consent management kind of, still runs across, and it's not easy to delete data when somebody asks to, right? You need to first know where it is. So what do we do, right? What are these 3 4 things if I quickly do, right? Or these are the 3 4 things that I think about, right? Because privacy is a culture, privacy is knowledge. The more you know it, the better you get at it, right? It will never happen that you will call Vaibhav or Akarsh and your problems will solve. They cannot solve, right? What we both can do is enable you to do it for tomorrow. See, infosec, it's still, you can install an antivirus, right? You can install 10 more softwares, manage them, monitor them, you'll be better at infosec. But privacy, right, it has to be continuous. So yeah, Vaibhav, what do you think? Yeah, what are these best practices, right, that we should think about?
Yeah, sure. So I think the starting point is point number 1, clearly laid out. You have to start with the data, what personal data you are collecting and processing inside your company, and and then answering basic question. Hey, where is it coming from? Is it coming from am I getting the data from a third party? Am I getting the data from a user? Does the user know I'm collecting the data? Because you can actually collect data from the user's device without them even knowing that. So that's the first step, right? So getting that visibility on what is my data and hence what's my privacy risk for my SaaS company is the starting point. Ideally, you would actually know roughly at the start when you are starting the company, when you're small, because everyone sits in an office, there are 10 people, everyone speaks to everyone. But as you grow, you'll be surprised to see how much that data changes, which is and then how much that data flow changes, right? So you will eventually see multiple third parties coming in, the integrations happening, because your teams will be decentralized, they will use multiple tools, data would start flowing there as well. So that's point number 2. How do you monitor that? So even if you do it once when you're small, how do you make sure you are on top of it? That's point number 2. I think that's very, very important. And I've seen companies who have done point number 1 well. So they invested a lot, paid a lot of money to the big fours and everyone in Tsaaro, got them, and they did it and looked at it as a point exercise. And then at the end of the year, they had something really good, but it was out of date because of the changes which were happening. So I think that's why you need to have something to monitor that as well. Yes, I think point number 3 is like a good advice. If if you're not sure, consent is the best one. But yeah, of course, it will fail in certain cases. So first, like you need someone to actually judge it and help you there. So I think Akash, you would do most of that work. Even in our current implementation, you have done that, right? Once you have 1 and 2, 3 is where you come in and say, boss, this is a place where we should use consent, and this is a place where we don't. And yeah, fourth is the continuous compliance part, right? So monthly check-ins, having that visibility on the next sprint with what's going to go live, having visibility on what SaaS tools do you use, is will make sure that you are on top of things.
Yeah, yeah. I think Vaibhav, thanks for wrapping that up. But I think there are some beautiful questions in the chat, right? So let's take them one by one.
Sure.
So a company with 90% base here and 10% base outside of India, what are the things that must be implemented? Okay, let's go back a slide. So we need to have a DPO. You don't have a DPO, still need to assign somebody in the company who acts like a privacy officer, privacy manager. If you have a SaaS product, it's a B2C product, you need to do a privacy by design review. If you don't want us to do it, you need to do it yourself, right? Get some checklist from CNIL, ICO, Dutch DPA, right? Get that
Yeah.
checklist, get it done, right? Collect consent. If it's a B2C company, you have to collect consent, right? I think somebody kind of pointed out saying it's not consent every time. High privacy professionals, right? So we'll talk about it. So yeah, so you have to do data mapping. See, the first thing that you do is you do data mapping. It all starts with data mapping. If you want to do business, if you want to think about first do data mapping, think about what you have, right? Then limit the data collection, fine tune your policy, implement consent management, get a design review, collect granular consent, store as per localization requirements, not as per your requirements, right? Because if, let's say, as simple as, right, so I was working with somebody and they had their servers in AWS in India, and then and Singapore, right? Their backup was in Singapore, and then they kind of were serving European customers, right? The issue with European customers is if you want to run a scan on their environment, they don't want to scan on PII from India, right? So if you are a SaaS company, if you work with me, I would be telling you, hey, why don't you use AWS Germany server or Netherlands server, right?
Ireland. Yeah.
Yeah, Irish server, and just get the scans done there, host the platform there, right, end to end.
Yeah.
The only thing that is happening from India is discussion and sales.
And just to double down there, Rohit, also another piece is that your customers who are non-Indian, who are serving US, I'm assuming your customers are B2C customers, so they could be under multiple regulations, so they might be having like a GDPR obligation still. So it's still good to have. It's still actually very, very important for you to do this entire exercise, because this is independent of the law. So, for example, doing a data mapping does not really matter. I mean, if you have to comply with the UAE law or the Singapore law or the Indian law, because it's a truth, right? It's a fact. It's the data that you're processing, collecting, sharing, and on top of it is what you need to look at the law and see how do I comply with it, right? That's the second part. Wherein tomorrow, let's say if you start having European customer, if you have that data mapping in, you can launch in that market in 2 to 3 months because you already know what data you're processing, where you're storing it. Then you can work with, let's say, with Akarsh and say, hey, let's look at it and what are our lawful basis. Let's document it. Let's localize it, and we can launch in 3 months. We don't have to worry about the European law. So if you have the basics right, you can launch in multiple countries without having any issues. But if you don't have that right, then you will at every country launch you'll have to figure that out.
Yeah, I will go to the next question then. I hope, Rohit, that answers your question. And this question is directly to Vaibhav. So Vaibhav, are there any data monitoring tools? And is it safe to expose such tools?
Traditionally, there have been a lot of DLP tools, as we call it, focusing on scanning outward emails, inward emails, and trying to find, if it contains credit card number and they've extended to things like Slack as well. So there are data monitoring tools who look at data at motion and find that out. Is it safe to expose data to such tools? That's a longer discussion that you will have to do with the vendor, and you have to look at, hey, how they are storing data, if they are storing data or if they are deleting it, things like those. Privado actually shines here, and we don't. And the way we built Privado was that we do not actually scan any of your data. We only scan your code. And essentially, what we are focusing on is the products and applications your teams are building, your engineering and product teams are building. And by scanning the code of, let's say, your SaaS app, we will first figure out what personal data that your SaaS app is collecting. Then where is that data flowing? So is it flowing to your database? Is it flowing to your API? Is it flowing to AWS? Is it flowing to your SaaS app? Like let's say your third parties, like let's say if you're using SendGrid to send emails, we will figure out what data is going to SendGrid. We will first tell you list of your subprocessor, which is a task in itself, and then tell you what data is flowing to those subprocessors. So yeah, you can we can have that chat. You can use us to do that. There are traditionally you can look at DLP tools as well, but they have limited scope in terms of the data elements that they can track. They only look at sensitive data. We look at roughly 200% data elements when we are tracking that.
Right. I think that kind of sums up one of the things, which is whether we should trust or not. See, trusting a software, a OEM, right? End of day means the brand value, right? That's where we come across, right? So what type of information securities they have, right? The things that we were talking about before starting this conversation, right? Why do you need to do this? It again went back to that question: why compliance is a must, right? Okay, we ask for consent, right? Where we can ask for consent, right? If we are data processors, or see, this is a concept that we'll have to get into, but my suggestion is go for consent, guys, right? Go for consent, right? And we will make our policies better, we will make our infrastructure better, and where there are two legal bases, let's say consent and legitimate interest. For example, we have to make our products better, right? So we need data for that. To up our game in the industry, we need data to up our products, right? So we cannot ask consent for that, right? We say that this is our legitimate interest, that is why we are doing this, right? So that's where we are kind of pointing it out. Okay, perfect. So
Yeah, and like actually, Akarsh's point is correct. If you start with the highest standard, saying that we'll have to do consent everywhere, and when you actually try to implement that, you'll see that it's not possible. But the thing it will make you do is you will actually find all the places where you need to have a legal basis, and then you can make that decision. Okay, not consent, legitimate interest, etc. So I think Akarsh's point is completely spot on there. Like it's a good, like if you have to remember something here, you have to do consent everywhere. That's actually an interesting way to look at it.
yep. So and again, Privado tool comes in, gets data mapping done, saves lives, right? Come on. So yeah. So okay. So guys, the question is, does compliance of data protection regulated laws also benefit your internal use and your own policies, your own work that you're doing, your own storage activities, right? So I was talking to a few months back, I was doing my podcast, right? And I was talking to somebody senior in one of the OEMs, right? So they call themselves, right? Everybody calls them trust. Privacy as a business, as a software, as a solution to you. End of day, what we're trying to do, we are increasing trust, right? We're just increasing trust. Our own trust to our own company, the trust to the vendor, the trust to a corporate where we are selling, right? End of day, it's all about trust, right? Why should they trust you, right? They won't trust you because you wanted to do business, so you missed all the compliance deadlines. And you won't trust somebody who did that. Come on, so let's be honest here, right? How do we implement privacy requirements, right? So my suggestion is, what do we think about? What do we need to make sure to do, right? We have to make sure our UI UX is right. We have to make sure the storage requirements are right. The access controls are right. Global usage is right. Is there any data localization requirement? Data coming out of Europe, did I take explicit consent for that, or did I only take implicit consent for that, right? Was there an opt-in consent? Was there an opt-out consent? Technicalities, infrastructure, right? Where is my infrastructure hosted? How aware is the user? What type of security controls do I have? Are my APIs talking to each other? Are they encrypted or not? Did I do a pen test or not? And what type of controls did I put in my business to make sure that data integrity is not lost, code integrity is not lost, right? I would be thinking about these things, right? When I would be, coming across things. Okay, let's talk about non-compliance quickly, right? What happens if we don't comply? So Vaibhav, would you like to take this up? Can you kind of, let us know what happens? Let's say we don't do any of this, right?
So yeah, I think it's at least from a risk perspective, it's pretty straightforward. It's laid out on. It doesn't matter if you're a controller or a processor. I mean, which means if you're directly collecting data from the customers, you have the same obligations, right, under GDPR. So that's like 20 million or 4% of the worldwide annual revenue. I think the major thing is if you have a breach or if you have a non-compliance sort of fine or even like a complaint, the important part to think is that companies actually track this, and you will be tagged as a very high risky vendor to work with. So the day this happens, this will be really bad for. I mean, you'll have to manage it really, really well. So unless you're like really, really big and customers can't choose anything apart from you, if you have not done these things right, you will actually face a lot of heat from the market. So I think that's number one. Losing that trust in the marketplace is even like a even you might just get 1,000. Let's say you get like €1,000 fine from one of the regulatory authorities. It's not going to do anything for your company. That fine is meaningless. But to be honest, from a trust perspective, you will lose a lot of trust in the marketplace. You will have to solve for those you for at least a couple of months or even longer. That fine record will stay. You will have to have those difficult conversations. You will lose business, and that's the reality. Trust is the most important thing when companies are doing business. For privacy teams, security teams, they are relying on you to process data in a manner which is the same as they would be processing internally. So I think that's the biggest risk of non-compliance. The biggest risk of non-compliance is not just the fine; it's losing trust in the marketplace.
And we kind of come, towards the end of the session, right, where we try to tell you something, right? I hope, it helped you, right, somewhere down the line.
One second, my question. Today, cloud offerings come with inbuilt PII identifiers and data protection features and so on. So, Srikar, by cloud offerings, do you mean like Google Cloud, AWS? What do you mean by cloud offerings?
Yeah, exactly. GCP, or if you take Snowflake, all these
Yeah,
hyperscalers are coming up with all these inbuilt features for privacy compliance.
sure.
So do you see a lot of traction there?
Yeah, so basically these are differentiators, right? So I'll take Microsoft as an example. Microsoft's key differentiator today is privacy. You will see them sponsoring a lot of privacy conferences. You'll see them launching white papers. They've launched a lot of privacy related tools because if I mean companies are brought in currently, especially large buying which is happening. Privacy is a differentiator, and if you follow like Europe, they've chosen, I think, if I'm correct, Microsoft Teams for schools, etc. And they've done like privacy impact assessment, transfer assessment, and then Microsoft has shined through. I think that's the context. So I think more and more cloud vendors will build such solutions. You might still, and each company is different. So you might still need other third parties to, like third party privacy tech vendors to help you out with, but there will be some solutions out of the box.
Okay, there are a few collective questions, right? I think Prashant has kind of pointed out. So hi Prashant, right? So guys, Prashant is right is with Vaibhav, right? Prashant kind of takes care of technology at Privado. Right guy to ask questions as well. But yeah, he has collected a few
Okay.
questions, so we'll take it up one by one. So, are there any certificates involved in GDPR, HIPAA, FCPA? Are there any certificates? Okay, okay. So there are no certifications to privacy. HIPAA has a certification, by the way, so you can get yourself audited around HIPAA. GDPR, FCPA, the only thing that you can do is either you can take a SOC 2 privacy, or you can go for an ISO 27701. Both of them are achievable. SOC 2 is a bit more tough because it's a point in time audit and it's a bit more tough. Next question is that only. I didn't know that. That's the question. So what does ISO and SOC 2 provide? How are they different? Okay. So basically, yeah. So basically, SOC 2, right? It's the moment you want to become someone's vendor, they want you to be certified, right? Same things that we have been talking about since we started this session. And SOC 2 is a point in time audit, right? And it gives a good assurance on your practices and the principles that you follow, right? So if you look at SOC 2, there's a principle called privacy, right? There are 5 principles, right? So if you add that privacy principle, right, then you become that SOC 2 privacy type 2 audited, right? Perfect. ISO 27701 works best in Europe, by the way, because
Yeah.
Europe is a very ISO oriented, country. So yeah, SOC 2 works a lot better in America. We do help in both of them. So yeah, that is there. But yeah, SOC 2 privacy or ISO 27701, whatever you go for, you have to do data mapping, and that's where everything starts, right? It starts with data mapping.
So what are the pros and cons of using bigger and smaller vendors? Uh, so yeah, I see. Ultimately, what you're trying to do is reaching a place where going from a place where you have nothing to reaching a place where you have something, and you will do some a prioritization exercise. To be honest, so you'll do prioritize on budget. You'll prioritize on the on if you say to someone that hey, I use this vendor. This vendor has audited us. How much that vendor carries weight. Ultimately, I think what matters, and this could be personal. I think ultimately what matters really is that whoever you are working with, can they deliver, can they really build their privacy program. So you should really do some background checks, and you should ask that hey, have you worked with a SaaS company at our stage, and then connect with that SaaS founder like you do for any other vendor, right? Like for example, you collect testimonials for like any you'll go to G2 and do that for these vendors as well on the consulting side, and you will see some vendors are good at certain stages, etc. So get that feedback. And that's about it, and you'll end up optimizing for budget or risk or other things. But yeah, that's how I will look at question number 3. Question number 4: how often does compliances need to be reviewed? So here's the thing about these privacy compliances. You have to be compliant like every second, right? Like, so let's say if you were compliant till today, and if you become non-compliant, you are non-compliant. So you need something which is monitoring it very, very fast. Now, of course, that's an ideal state. You either need tooling to do that. So that's one, or you need regular audits. So have at least like an annual audit to make sure you're catching things. Ideally, you should have someone working in privacy in your company, or someone like Akarsh helping you out. So they will at least do it on a weekly/monthly basis. But if you have to make it continuous, you need tooling. That's the answer. I mean, we can look at it on security side. They have tooling to do continuous. You don't ask the question, hey, do I need to do a SOC to review today? Or and then if I've done it today, then do I do it 3 months from now? Their checks are the checks are automatic, so they get report every day, every Monday, the moment
Yeah.
the control goes off. So you need something in private like that in privacy as well.
Right. So yeah. By the way, these slides that we were discussing about the checklist, everything is embedded in one go. Just click on that link, get your slides, right, and it'll be sorted for some time, right? And if you want to reach out to us, I can already see a lot of people have connected with me on LinkedIn, right? If you have followed me, I'll just send you a request because my ID is a bit different. It cannot take connection request directly until you go on the right and click down. Okay, perfect. So any more questions? We're still there. We still have some 5 more minutes, just 5 more minutes, right? So if you have questions, drop them down. If you don't have questions, thanks a ton for joining the session. We're very happy to see so many people on Saturday. It's not easy, right? Thanks a ton for trusting us that we can tell you something. And we hope we were right. Thanks a ton, Vaibhav, right, for joining this session, helping us
Thanks
out,
everyone.
telling about your best product here, right, around data mapping, which is Privado, right? So, Vaibhav, would you like to kind of thank everyone?
Yeah, sure. Thanks everyone for coming in on Saturday morning and for the amazing, interesting questions. And I'm sure, I'm at least, I'm hoping, once you go back to office to work on Monday, there might be a couple of things that you might be picking up from the session. And as Akar said, our profiles are there. So feel free to connect, DM us and ask any question at any point of time. We'd love to help.
Yeah.
And thanks again.
Thanks a ton, Vaibhav. Thanks a ton, Privado team, for helping us out in getting this session done. Thank you, Prajula. Thank you, Triveni, for the session. Have a
Thanks,
nice day,
Triveni.
guys, and I will see you
Bye-bye.
soon.